Greg Laurie, the senior pastor of Harvest Bible Church, published a video maybe 10, 15 years ago that showed him preaching on a stage where he was surrounded by screens, where he had college kids sitting on pillows behind him, and where he had little animation clips pop up on televisions at different points that reinforced the stories in his sermon. It was incredible. It was fascinating. It was distracting, but it was also the first time I had seen someone use new media in a new way for genuine gospel purposes. At our church right now, we do something different than what Greg Laurie did, but similar in that we're constantly tinkering and trying out new things while I'm preaching, while the other guys are preaching. So for example, we realize that a lot of people like to have video of the person talking. I don't like that. I don't like seeing myself on video, but we've got, 6 or 7 screens hanging from the ceiling, and 3 of them at different strategic locations show my head, much like this video shows my head and shoulders, because people like to see my facial expressions, and if they're too far back, they can't. They like it, it keeps them engaged, so we use it. That is a really simple kind of homiletical innovation. Now, I was resistant to it because I don't want to be a celebrity preacher and that feels vaguely ego-driven and weird, but I realized this actually isn't about me. This is about helping them engage the story of God. This is about preaching in a way that makes sense to them. Additionally, we have TVs mounted along the front of our stage, and on those TVs we post hashtags, Facebook posts, questions from Twitter, Facebook, sometimes even from Instagram, anything that anybody's saying about us on the internet in real time, and I'll respond to what pops up on those screens. So if somebody asks a question on Facebook, if they're watching me live on YouTube or Facebook or on our stream or whatever, I'll stop the sermon and answer their question if it's an appropriate moment, and I'll always take time for questions from our internet audience or from the people in the congregation who post something on their phones to Facebook at the end of the sermon for 2 or 3 minutes. We live stream our sermons. We have what we call a web show, which is like a news show that runs concurrent with our services. So instead of broadcasting our music, we have volunteers and editorial content and people who are given interviews, and that's happening in real time on our internet station. So when I'm done preaching on the stage, I walk into the studio where they're filming the internet show, and then I answer questions in there too, because we're engaging the culture on the culture's terms, bringing gospel to them rather than just reinforcing what we've always done. And believe me, this stuff is hard. It's hard for me. It's weird for me. And even though I'm in one sense a digital native, I grew up playing video games, I didn't grow up on Facebook. Facebook is still confusing, and yet I realize in order for the gospel to make sense to this generation, to this culture, to future generations and future culture, I have to be obedient and step into their world with the good news of Jesus. And I also have to model for younger people that this is how we do it, and I have to model for older people that this is how we do it. So we have to rethink our use of screens and scrims. We've got to think about how our culture works, how they process information. Most teenagers on down are double and triple screening in their leisure time. So how can we double and triple screen at church without totally alienating people who grew up in the baby boom or in the builder generations? And it's hard, but I think if we have to err, we should err on the side of reaching the young, because the young are immature. And the older ones are at least mature enough to understand that if we don't do something to reach their children and their grandchildren, their kids will be lost. And the older generations are more willing to sacrifice their comfort for the sake of their children's souls than the other way around.